The internet is buzzing with conversations following a journalist's pointed criticism of Starmer, which left him in a tough spot during a live TV appearance. The Prime Minister has lost his composure and can only respond with anger, as the challenges he faces are seen by the British as a direct consequence of his numerous missteps. Let's take a closer look at what transpired.
Are you being straight and honest and understand it? I'm sure you costed it. This is being paid for out of the windfall tax, isn't it? We know that you had a promise about investing 28 billion that you had to change and roll back on. Now I believe about 6 billion. A lot of people, particularly in the papers today, and a lot of conservative briefings are saying it's going to be way, way more than that before we see any kind of impact. So are you being honest about the cost of going green, not just financially to us in tax, but also in terms of job losses? Because you're there in Scotland. Could you rule out job losses there if we move from the industry?
Shortly after Starmer enthusiastically laid out his promises, he brazenly neglected his commitments. This is truly astonishing in its disappointment. Since he took office, electricity bills have surged, with average energy costs reaching a staggering £1,717 per month for a typical family in the UK. People are struggling to manage this dramatic price hike, yet Starmer speaks nonchalantly about cost-cutting measures, as if they are a quick fix for all issues. However, the reality is far more complex than he appears to believe. This serves as a clear and painful illustration of the hypocrisy and injustice in his approach.
But actually, what I'd like to put to you is that why should anybody believe you? You started with some pledges in 2019, if I can just finish, which you've dropped. You economic justice, including increasing income tax for the top 5% earners. That's gone. Social justice, including abolishing tuition fees, abolishing universal credit. You've dropped that. Defending migrants' rights, including defending free movement as we leave the EU and a compassionate immigration system.
It appears that journalists anticipated public outrage even before Starmer had the opportunity to stumble over his own political statements. This expectation is entirely warranted, considering he misled people by raising false hopes to secure the prime ministership. Once he assumed his position at Downing Street, he promptly reneged on all his promises. This sense of betrayal fueled journalists' anger, leading them to relentlessly pose tough questions to Starmer, leaving him with no opportunity to evade criticism.
So why should we believe any of your new 6 first steps?
Sir Keir Starmer, I believe, can hear us now. We might have a slightly dodgy connection to Scotland, but good to speak to you this morning, both you and the Prime Minister today, promising cheaper gas and electricity bills. You're, of course, where you are because you're setting up Great British Energy, which is going to be based in Scotland, as I understand it, publicly owned company to tackle it. So you want to bring down household bills and offer energy security. How much cheaper will our bills be under a Labour government? 5%, 10%? What will it...
Starmer is frantically trying to cover up his embarrassment with weak, false claims. However, journalist Adil Ray didn't let him off the hook. He quickly revealed all of Starmer's attempts to obscure the truth. Now, Starmer can hardly keep his emotions in check, and his facade of calmness is on the verge of breaking.
Mr. Starmer, can we talk about sort of the pledges that you call, what you call the first steps? You know, what people really want to see from a new government, whoever that might be, are promises and pledges that governments stick to and see some trust and credibility. First of all, you're being accused, a lot of your steps, the 6 steps that you labelled, things about the NHS, the economy and stop the boats, are very similar to Rishi Sunak's. But actually, what I'd like to put to you is that why should anybody believe you? You started with some pledges in 2019, if I can just finish, which you've dropped. You economic justice, including increasing income tax for the top 5% earners. That's gone. Social justice, including abolishing tuition fees, abolishing universal credit. You've dropped that. Defending migrants' rights, including defending free movement as we leave the EU and a compassionate immigration system. You've dropped that. So why should we believe any of your new 6 first steps?
When it comes to healthcare, he proposed increasing the number of weekly visits by 40,000 to address the backlog of nearly 8 million unfinished appointments. However, one has to wonder why can't he acknowledge that the current government struggles to effectively implement such plans. Residents of the UK are grappling with rising living costs and exorbitant electricity bills, all while receiving no assistance from the government. How can Starmer confidently assert that he can resolve these issues without disappointing a public that is already fatigued by existing policies and eager for change? Regarding immigration, Starmer's stance is even more perplexing and ambiguous. The government has introduced a new border strategy aimed at combating human trafficking, yet these measures have not yielded the anticipated results. Still, Starmer continues to criticize the government's actions, particularly the plan to resettle refugees in Rwanda, leaving the public confused and in the dark. The current situation clearly indicates that if Starmer had shown even a hint of objectivity and genuinely given this plan a fair chance, it could have produced much more significant outcomes. Instead, he made the baffling decision to sign a costly agreement worth £521 million, which ties the UK down for a full 8 years. This choice is not only illogical but also underscores his glaring inconsistency on immigration matters. The Labour Party now appears inactive, merely advocating for the establishment of safe and legal migration routes, yet they lack any compelling arguments to support their implementation. Vulnerable individuals, rather than being able to migrate safely, are forced to risk their lives by boarding small, dangerous boats to navigate perilous seas. Numerous international organizations and refugee agencies are raising alarms, stressing that the safe routes Starmer mentions do not truly exist, especially for those fleeing the horrors of war in countries like Afghanistan or Syria.
Of course. And I mean, as you will know better than anyone, having been a GP, you know, resources at the moment for GPs seem to be less than they were perhaps then. You've got more patients to deal with probably. A&Es are under more pressure than they've ever been. And so for pensioners who want to see a doctor, it's going to be harder and harder anyway, isn't it?
Of course. And also in winter, we've got more colds and coughs and infections.
Yeah.
And going to the general practitioner or going to A&E can be difficult to start with, but can also be dangerous for the elderly because they can pick up lots of infections which can impact on their pre-existing condition.
Didn't Starmer himself assure us that the Labour Party stands united in defending Britain's interests? Yet, what do we actually observe? Serious disagreements are brewing within the party regarding his policies, and these are not mere whispers of discontent, it's a full-blown storm. Numerous members of Parliament are openly furious about his decision to cut winter fuel costs. If Starmer intends to proceed on his own, disregarding the anger and protests within his own party, can we still view the Labour Party as a united front? Or is this just another elaborate facade like his previous actions designed to obscure his true intentions? Adil Ray relentlessly dismantled Starmer during the interview, forcing him to confront the harsh truths he had desperately tried to conceal. This interview was a significant test for him, one from which he couldn't escape. He found himself ensnared in questions that left him utterly baffled and disoriented. Is this the end for him? Only time will tell. However, one thing is certain: this interview will linger in Starmer's mind, as his vague responses only exacerbated his predicament and cast him in an even more negative light. A straightforward question was posed, yet instead of providing a clear and direct answer, he chose to sidestep it entirely. The question was simple, but he failed to deliver an adequate response. His words came across as hollow, underscoring the deep contradictions in his own positions. This is particularly evident in his policies, which starkly contradict his earlier promises, revealing his inconsistency and weakness as a leader. What are your thoughts on the issues discussed in today's video? I'd like to hear your opinion. See you soon.